Hello, computer scientist. Welcome back for our third lesson in our Computer Science 2 class. We are studying object-oriented programming using Java. What I'd like you to do is to make a new project in our BlueJ folder. I just feel like we've used this one people project up enough. So I'm going to select a new project and just be sure to save it somewhere where you can find it. And I'm going to call this project music. And I'll close that old one. For this project, I'd like to start by making a class called Song. So let's make a new class. We'll call it Song. And again, we get a lot of kind of helper code here. We'll just Control A and get rid of it. All right, so what I want to do today is focus on how to use logic and math operators to make our classes and methods useful and helpful to others. So I want you to imagine that we have a electronic radio DJ kind of database, and we want our DJs on the radio to be able to pick songs and be able to quickly identify the author of the song, the musician or the band, the name of the song, and how long it will take to play the song in seconds or minutes, because that kind of information is really important when you're trying to fit in commercial breaks and news breaks and station identification. They really want to know that kind of information. And so I think it'd be worthwhile if we could make this class, and I think that'd be something that radio DJs would appreciate, especially with everything being computerized these days, right? They really would appreciate having nice, digital, easy to find information. So that just calls out for a class. Class song. Now, there's lots of different things that we could store in here to describe the song, excuse me. I'm going to describe the song's length in the number of seconds, and I'd like us to round it to the nearest second. So if we're going to be rounding something, a song length in seconds, we're going to be rounding it to the nearest second, then we can now use an integer data type, which is called int. So I'm going to call this just length in seconds. Okay, so that we have a variable now to store each individual song length in seconds. So, if the song was 2 minutes, we would say 120 seconds. Now I'm going to store the name of the song. And that's going to be a string because it's a word. Lastly, let's do the author of the song, which could be a band or a musician, something like that. And again, we'll store it as a string because it's words. All right, let's make our constructor. So sometimes we like to make default constructors. We've seen that before. That's where we have a constructor that takes no parameters, right? And then we would give default values. You don't need to type this, by the way. I'm just demonstrating. We would give this default values like that. But, it makes sense to have default things. Like we have them all the time in computer science. We'll learn that there's, default windows, default menu bars, default, scroll bars, things like that. Things we use a lot over and over and over again that we don't necessarily want to have to enter in all these parameters since we very rarely change them. And then have another constructor that gives us the ability to customize with parameters. So we can have multiple constructors as long as we have um, different amounts of parameters for each one. I'm going to give the length here, length in seconds equals 0. So this is kind of a not very good song, right? But it's just a default song here. Then we could have another song where we get to actually give information to the constructor. So I'll say length, comma. We separate these each parameter with a comma. String song name. Notice the camel case there, and string author name or auth name. So again, it's definitely preferable to use a different word here than the variable you're setting with it. It is possible to have the match if you do a little extra stuff, but you need to be careful about that. So we like to use different words here than here, but we want them to be able to indicate the same thing. Now I'll simply use those to set these values. Oh, that's a bad one. There we go. Make sure you have these values up here on the left because they're the permanent ones, and we assign from right to left. We assign going this way. Okay. And then author equals author name. All right, so I have got a default song and then a song that requires us to enter some information. You can make the default song anything you want. I'm actually going to go ahead and remove it. I'm not going to support the creation of a default song. But I did want to review that since it's important for upcoming assignments, that you remember that you can make two constructors. A default constructor like that has a default constructor that has no parameters, that you just initialize these values as you see fit, and then another constructor that takes a parameter for each instance variable that you want to initialize. And this is allowing our users of our class to customize it. But like I said, I'm not gonna use this. I'll get rid of it again. All right. So what I want to do today is I want to make three methods, just three for now. First of all, I want to write a method that allows the user of this class to access the length of the song in seconds. We already have that variable right here, but I think you're going to see that we want to have things organized in methods, not variables. Variables can be a long list of just confusing stuff, and they're not easily readable, whereas methods are the preferred way to interact with things. And we're going to be moving more and more that direction, so I wanted to go ahead and introduce it today. So if we're accessing how long the song is in seconds, we can see from the top of the class that that's an integer variable type. So remember, when we write a method, we start with what are we returning? Well, I'm going to be returning a length of a song rounded to the nearest second. So that's an int. Next, I need to put the name of the method. And I'm just going to call this get length in seconds. And it's kind of a long method name, but notice the camel case methods, just like variables, start with the lowercase letter, and then every letter that begins the next word is capitalized. The only method that should begin with a capital letter is your constructor, which also doesn't have a return type. So it's special. The constructor is special. Capital letter matches the name of your class, always has a capital letter. All right. Now, get length in seconds. Well, I don't need to do any math here. I just say return. And I know that seems kind of silly right now, but this is actually a really important technique, and we're going to rely on this a lot. These are called accessor methods, or actually they're often called getter methods because they start with the word get. Really simple to write, but really important for many reasons that we'll learn. I'm going to make two more getter methods, but they're going to require a little bit more work to do them. So the next thing I want to return is a method that returns the length of the song in minutes, but I don't want it rounded to the nearest minute, because if I have a song that's 90 seconds long, I don't want to say that's 2 minutes. I mean, that's really inaccurate. So I want to go ahead and return a real number value. So remember, real numbers are numbers that have, whole number and then decimals. I don't like using the word decimal number because it's very clear, I think, to most of my students what that means. But it gets confusing in computer science because decimal is actually kind of a different thing than just numbers that have, like 3.7. So I like to use the term real numbers when I talk about, ints that are whole numbers and reals that have, numbers after the decimal place. So we're going to be returning a real number value. So we need to call this a double. The standard floating point, another word for a real number, a floating point number in Java is called a double. It stands for double precision. And we'll learn that that's because it's double in size of an int. It's 64-bit number. So it's a big one. All right, so we're going to say get length in minutes. Well, I think we know we're going to be returning something. Sometimes you have to do a lot of work first before you return. And then other times you can just return on one line. Sometimes, you could do it multiple ways. But I think we can return the calculation. So this word return will wait until whatever we do. If we do a whole bunch of math here on my line 17, which, if y'all are wondering, by the way, if you just right click here, you can display line numbers. Just right click on this gray panel here. So I'm going to take the length of the song in seconds, and I can actually call the method if I want it, but we'll just say the variable name, length in seconds. Okay, and now I'm going to divide that by 60. Okay, now let's test this because I want you to see something that happens. All right, I'm going to make a song, and I'm going to make it 90 seconds long, and the song's name is going to be called, I don't know, Java by CS Singers, okay? All right, that's great. So we've got our methods here. Boom, 90 seconds. That's yeah, we could inspect it and see it, but it's so much better to interact with things through a method. Now let's get the length in minutes. And so this should be, it was 90 seconds, so it should be 1.5, right? 1.0. Okay, so what happened there? Well, let's take a look. I warned you it was going to be wrong. So you can always go wider in Java. You can always take an int and make it into a double by simply adding 0.0 to the end of it. And that's the first thing I want to point out that happened. So in reality, this is just returning the number 1. But because we promised to return a double, Java just puts a 0.0 on it. Java doesn't like to go from a double down to an int because you might lose information, because if it's like a 1.3, it would become a 1, and it doesn't want to do that without giving you an error and warning you. But it'll always go from an int out to a double, because you can take any whole number and put a 0.0 behind it to make it a double. So that's why we're getting 1.0. But why are we getting a 1? Well, the reason why is because length in seconds is of type int, and I'm dividing it by the number 60. And unlike some programming languages that default to regular division, like Python, the default in Java is actually integer division. So if you are dividing an int variable by an int number like 60, then you will get an int. So because 60 goes in the 90 one time with a remainder of 30, it's not gonna. It's just gonna be the number 1, and then we're just packing a 0.0 on at the end. So what we need to do to fix this is put a 0.0. So anytime you want to really divide in Java, you have to have one of your numbers be a double. If one of your numbers is a double, it'll really divide. So, we could have made length in seconds a double from the get-go and not had this problem, but I really wanted us to see this. Also, there's another reason why, which we'll come across in a second or two. So putting the 0.0 easily makes it go down to being proper division. And I'll just show that again. I'll put in 90. I'll call it song A by ABBA. So ABBA made the song A. Okay. Now I get length in minutes, and it's the proper 1.5. Okay. So I'm going to put a little comment there. And when I say real divide, I don't mean like dividing for real. I mean real number division so that we get decimals. Okay. So next, we're going to write one more method, and I want it to return a string. So this is going to be words, right? So we're going to need quotes on this one. And I'm going to call it get description. So this is what our DJs are going to want to be able to access really quickly. So, but here's what I wanted to respond. I want it to say the name of the song, who it's by, how many minutes it is, and how many seconds it is. So, for example, in our 90-second song, we're not going to say 1.5 minutes. We're going to say 1 minute, 30 seconds. So let's take a look at how we do that. First, we need to figure out how many minutes are in the song. So I'm going to say int mins. Be careful here. You don't want to use a variable name that is already one of your fields. I can use a temporary variable name that I used, like, say, for a parameter. I'm free to use those again. But you don't want to use the same name there that you used up here. So this is the first time I think we've seen this. This is a temporary variable. It's similar to variables that are created as a parameter, but they're just a variable I'm going to make for just a second to do some work. So when the getDescription method is called, the memory of the computer, we're gonna dive in. Java's going to dive into the memory of the computer. It's going to select some spots and make that variable in the memory called mins. But when the method is done, so as soon as this curly brace here, this yellow block is done, just like parameters, it'll be thrown away and erased. Because we only are using it for a second. It's not permanent unless it's listed out here, okay? So mins is going to be, and we saw this earlier when we took the length in seconds, right? Length in seconds, and we divided it by 60. This time I want to. And that's why I wanted length in seconds to be an integer, because it's always easy to take an int and make it a double by just dividing it by 0.0, multiplying it times 1.0 would keep it the same, but to make it a double. So that's easy, but it's difficult or more work to take a double and make it into an int. And that's exactly what I want here. So because, like, if the song is 90 seconds, then mins is going to be a 1. And that's what I want, because it's 1 minute and 30 seconds. So now how do I get the number of seconds that are remaining? Well, there's a couple different things I could do. Let me call this secs. I don't think we use that. Yeah. Okay. And I could take the length of the song in seconds, right? And then subtract the number of minutes of the song, which I just calculated here, times 60 seconds for each one of those, right? So if we had a 90-second song, let me use comments here. So if we had a 90-second song, we would be subtracting 1 times 60, so we'd get the 30. Well, this operation is actually pre-built into the computer. It's called modulo arithmetic. It returns whatever is left over after dividing. So for example, if the length in seconds had been 200 seconds, 60 goes into 200 3 times with 20 remaining. And so that's what the modulo does. So let's take a look at that one. The modulo looks like a division sign because there's division in it, but it's the percent sign. That's the modulo operator, okay? So this is going to give me the remainder when I divide by 60. We're now ready to return that we have the name of the song. Is that what it's called? Name? Okay. The real, not this one. I got to look here, y'all. The name of the song by, so I'm concatenating the name of the song by the author is, and now I'm going to say how many minutes it is. So I'm going to say mins. Now this is a unique feature of Java. It allows us to easily concatenate int values with string values. Some programming languages require us to convert things to strings explicitly. This will do it for us. So it's automatically going to make mins into a string because I'm adding it to a string. So int mins, and then I'm going to say what that is. That's how many minutes. And, oh, I need to have and here. And seconds. All right. And I'm not printing, I'm just returning here. If I wanted to print that, I would have to say system.out.println, and then I would put this whole thing here inside these parentheses. But let's just return, okay? Compile, let's check it out. All right, I'm going to make a song. The name of the song is going to be 325 seconds long. And the name of the song is called Lost in Memory. And it's going to be by CD-ROMer. All right. Okay, we got our length in minutes. Okay, it's kind of a decimally number, but that's okay. 5.412 or 417. Okay. Got our length in seconds, which is just the number I typed in. Let's get our description. Lost in memory by CD-ROMer is 5 minutes and 25 seconds. All right, great. Well, I hope you enjoyed making that class. You're going to have an assignment today in which you're going to use some more logic to make really useful classes for storing and retrieving information. So until next time, good luck and have fun out there.